What do they want at the center of their stack? Like what platform you're going to pick. I mean, again, there's Salesforce, there's HubSpot, there's Marketo. And I think one of the things you should look at when you are evaluating, which platform to put at the center of your stack is what are the apps that are available in the ecosystem.
Welcome to the B2B Lead Gen Podcast, your weekly audio masterclass on converting leads to revenue. I'm your host, Eric Schwartzman, author of The Digital Pivot. Let's do this. My guest today is Scott Brinker. He is Vice President of Platform Ecosystem at HubSpot and editor at Chief MarTech. He's also Program Chair of the MarTech Conference and a graduate of the MIT Sloan School of Management. Scott, welcome to the B2B Lead Gen Podcast.
It's great to be here with you, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've been trying to get you forever, so I'm glad we're finally on the phone here. And I've had my eye on the MarTech 5000 for some time now. But tell us a little bit about what is ChiefMarTech.com.
Sure. So that was a blog I started, 13 years ago. When I was first, just really getting fascinated by this intermingling between the worlds of marketing and software and IT, which, 13 years ago still felt like a bit of a strange bedfellows, two very different disciplines. But obviously over the past decade or so, have definitely, converged and intertwined. That blog was a little bit of a isolated, nerdy study. And hey, do you do both software and marketing? And, 50 people would raise their hand.
And so you did that. You started that before you worked at HubSpot?
Yeah. So at the time I was the co-founder of a SaaS company, Ion Interactive, that made a SaaS platform for interactive content. And actually before that was running an agency that did web development for largely Fortune 500 companies. And so that was actually the inspiration for the blog is we'd get hired by the marketing departments at these very large companies. And then since I was running the technology team at the agency, it would be my job to go and talk to the IT department of the client because the marketing team and the IT team didn't actually talk to each other. It wasn't even that they were hostile to each other. It was just, they were just living in such separate worlds and universes. And so those days of shuttle diplomacy between IT and marketing and the anticipation that, this seems like these two folks have to come together was the inspiration for the blog.
And now I guess, they're pretty much leading the charge, right? I mean,
yeah, like you just take this for granted now. Well, obviously.
Because when HubSpot first started selling in, I mean, you were educating a bleeding edge market.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was definitely HubSpot's claim to fame, was not only was it educating essentially a new generation of marketing, it really found that, pivot point, where as people were going more and more to the internet to actually make decisions about who they wanted to do business with, that whole shift from outbound sales and, heavy advertising budgets to a model that, would essentially attract customers by publishing content that was useful to them, that would show up in Google and social networks and things like that. Yeah, again, that was kind of like a radical transformation pivot, in the marketing industry. And HubSpot both caught that pivot, but also did a really good job of just leaning into educating marketers for how to take advantage of it.
And so talk to us a little bit about what you do now at HubSpot. What is ecosystem partner development?
Yeah, I kind of feel like I have one of the coolest jobs on the planet right now. So HubSpot, has moved beyond just being a product company that, builds and sells its own products to really truly being a platform where we now have, nearly 700 app partners who have integrated their own SaaS applications or built custom apps for the HubSpot platform. As you probably know, right? In marketing now, the explosion of all these marketing technologies was great in the sense that a lot of innovative capabilities were created. But the challenge that marketers faced was, okay, well, sure, I can buy all these specialist tools, but how do I get them to work together? And so my mission at HubSpot is very much to help solve that problem by saying, okay, well, if HubSpot is at the center of your stack, we'd like to work with all those companies to have out-of-the-box integrations. So you don't have to think about that. You can just plug them in and they just work.
Yeah. It's the dirty little secret with integration is, just how integrated are the two tools? I mean, some things may integrate, some things may not. And often, even the vendors don't know what will work and what won't work until you put it together. And that's often, a bit of a rude awakening after you've invested a lot of time, trying to put things two and two together, hoping it will lead to four, but often it leads to three. And you see, when you see Zapier or middleware is the only option, I'm usually terrified. Oh my God, don't get into that mess, right? Because that's going to be a hamster wheel I'm never going to be able to get off. I'm going to have to manually maintain those integrations. So talk to us a little bit about how does a marketer who's looking to stack interoperable technology really get a sense of what different applications can do together before deploying a stack?
Yeah, well, I think you've really put your finger on it, perfectly, which, the fact that everything's in the cloud now and everything has an API, when someone asks, does product A and product B, do they integrate? There's probably an answer somewhere that says, well, yeah, we technically could probably do that. But it makes a really big difference, in just what is the nature of that integration? Like, are these things really, truly, have they been built to work together? And so, yeah, this is, both one of the things I've been an advocate on my blog since before I joined HubSpot, but also obviously now what I do, at HubSpot is to very much encourage marketers to evaluate, first of all, what do they want at the center of their stack? Like what platform you're going to pick. I mean, again, there's Salesforce, there's HubSpot, there's Marketo. And I think one of the things you should look at when you are evaluating, which platform to put at the center of your stack is what are the apps that are available in the ecosystem and how well do they align, with your needs or their pricing or, those various dimensions. Because really what you want to get to is a place that, once you've chosen the foundational platform of your stack, then you're really able to evaluate those partners that have built crafted integrations to that specific platform. And it's, it's more than just like, oh, are they passing data back and forth? It's like, do they have mechanisms to tie into each other's workflow? Are you able to share elements of the UI from one product into the other? Really the things you do to make an integration seamless.
Yeah, often you don't even know. It's difficult to imagine a workflow before it exists. In my new book, The Digital Pivot, which is about digital marketing, I spent the first 3 chapters just talking about stacks, automation, funnels, and analytics, because I kind of feel like that's the foundation of digital marketing nowadays. If you don't start from there, what do you have to build on? What are you wasting your time on social media if you don't have a path to purchase and a funnel and you can't measure and you can't optimize? And one of the cool things about, chiefmartech.com is the fact that you've actually classified so many of these apps in this MarTech 5000. So talk to us a little bit about how that came to be and what it is.
Yeah, that was an interesting accident of how that came about. So I said, I started the blog because I was really interested in how technology talent was going to start to migrate into the marketing department. And so in 2011, I was giving a presentation to a group of CMOs, and I was trying to convince them why they needed more technical talent in the marketing department, and so I put together the first version of that MarTech landscape. At the time, I think I found around 150 products, which, oh my goodness, I mean, in 2011, people looked at this slide and they were like, my God, 150 products, how will you ever keep track of them all? But yeah, it was very much as, an exhibit to just say, hey, look, you're becoming dependent on a lot of technology. It might be a good idea to have some people who, can really run those engines for you. And then I kept going back to it year over year, and was just astounded by the rate at which it exploded. I went from 150 to like 300, and then 1,000, and then 2,000, and 4,000, and pretty much every year I would publish that. People would say, "Okay, this is just crazy. This has to consolidate. There's no way it's going to get any bigger." And part of me was like, "Yeah, I agree with you. This is kind of wild." On the other hand, like, all these forces of, just it becoming easier and easier for people to create software. There being so much demand, within the marketing community for new ways to take advantage of new channels or new tactics, or, take advantage of new technology in interesting ways. It kind of was a perfect storm that allowed it to grow to what was last year 8,000 solutions. We kept calling it the MarTech 5,000, but it's kind of anachronistic by that point in time.
So just as businesses need an end-to-end solution to compete, digital marketers need tools to attract, nurture, and convert awareness to consideration, evaluation, and transactions online. And there are literally thousands now of marketing technology solutions, and you actually categorize them by advertising and promotions, content and experience, social and relationships, commerce and sales, data and management. And I imagine it's probably tough to fit some of them into those categories because they probably leak out into other categories as well, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I would say categorization was always the hardest part of that project for that exact reason. I mean, actually, I'm very sympathetic to the fact that sometimes some of the most innovative products out there, part of the innovation they're bringing is they're not thinking about categories from an analyst perspective. They're thinking about, okay, what are the jobs to be done for a particular marketer in a particular business, and how do I create something great to help them do that? And so that sort of innovative thinking, I think, can be very valuable. On the other hand, those things do get very hard to apples to apples, compare and put into categories. So it's definitely an imperfect art.
Hey, let me ask you a really sort of basic question, because I imagine it's something you've spent a lot of time explaining to people. So you might have some really good language around this. But if I was to say to you, hey, explain to my CEO why interoperability is important, do you have sort of a greatest hits on that one?
Wow. I mean, you could kind of think of, a business as being, like analogous to, the human body, right? It's like you've got, depending on your stage of life, right, the size of your human body here. If you just have, isolated fingers and toes and elbows, and there's no nervous system, to coordinate them, or there's no bloodstream to actually flow nutrients through it. I mean, you're going to end up with that body being pretty useless. It's kind of the same thing. We've got this digital body that is, the modern business, and there's all these different pieces and components, and they all have a role to play. But if you can't connect the nervous system to coordinate them, or the bloodstream to keep the data nutrients flowing between them, it atrophies pretty quickly. That's probably kind of a weird analogy now that I think about that.
So, for so many years from the get-go, these tools were really only available to enterprise and big organizations that had the chops to be able to get them up and running. And then, of course, tools like HubSpot came along and it became available to, small business. Is small business a big part of the HubSpot customer base?
It is. HubSpot's really moved more to the mid-market, as, most of the customers we serve, but definitely, a fair number of smaller businesses too, particularly those that tend to be relatively technically savvy, or not even technically savvy, but just sort of like digital savvy. Like, okay, they know they want to really leverage digital marketing, and digital businesses, part of their go-to-market strategy. But I actually agree with you so much, though, that possibly one of the bigger revolutions that happened here with software is because moving to the cloud just totally changed the economics of this. All these technologies that previously were only available to large enterprises, there are now incarnations of these technologies, new generations of these technologies that, are affordable for almost any business. And I think in many ways, it's like a wonderful time to be a small business because you kind of get the best of both worlds. You're able to get fairly sophisticated technology, but at the same time, you have that inherent agility, that small businesses have relative to, larger competitors. When you can really play both those cards at the same time, you can do some pretty impressive work.
Let's talk about small business for a second, because it's an important part of the U.S. economy. Many small businesses have been hit hard by the pandemic. I think I saw a stat that's by the SBA that said, during a disaster or public health emergency, as many as 40 to 60% of, small businesses never come back. They're completely gone. And if you look at, what's happening now, obviously we have a huge stimulus coming into the economy, but, unemployment is still fairly high. Automation is definitely allowing companies to do more with less. And, it remains to be seen whether or not the demand for commercial real estate will, be what it once was. I mean, obviously people are going to want to work together, but will companies want to house as many employees in the future? Who knows? When you think about small business and now the fact that there are 5,000 of these apps, and it actually is possible for a small business to pivot to digital. How does a small business get started? Like, if I'm a jack of all trades and I'm ringing the register by day and on the internet downloading white papers at night trying to figure out how to automate my business, where do I get the resources to help me pivot? How do I spec my stack? How do I get a scope study going? I mean, what is the process by which a small business can minimize risk and, maximize potential for success?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, I would certainly not recommend a new small business, a small business that is new to this should not read my blog. They should not look at my MarTech landscape. It will only distract them and freak them out. That is definitely not the place to start. Frankly, you kind of setting me up here, but, buy a product like HubSpot. I mean, it does so much out of the box, and it provides such good educational materials and things like HubSpot Academy that I really do feel like, solutions like that, particularly when you're just getting started, that's the best way to go. Because, so much of digital marketing, it's still, at the end of the day, it isn't the technology. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with technology, but when you're first just making sure that, the web experience is good, that you're able to have, a list so that, as, customers or prospects are subscribing to you, you're able to send them good email, you're getting into that content marketing flow to really carve out your niche, in the market. These are all things that, technology helps with. But the real work is, the actual content, and defining this and aligning it with your business. And I think for a small business and someone that's just going through the early stages of that digital transformation, that's where I would put your energy. And then once you've got that foundation in place and it's good and it's solid, you will then start to identify opportunities like, oh, there might be this neat new thing I'd like to do over here. And that's when you can start to look at the ecosystem and you can start to look at other apps that might provide more specialized capabilities. But yeah, I wouldn't think about a stack as my first starting point.
So then you think for small business, go with some sort of vertically integrated solution that's already pre-configured and just turn on the apps you need, get started there. And then if one of those vertically integrated solutions doesn't outperform in your sector, perhaps you upgrade to best of breed there, move that into the stack and try to compete on that basis.
Yeah, it's like, and again, I'm speaking about HubSpot. Obviously, I know it the best. I mean, there are definitely other products out there too. But one of the things about HubSpot's strategy that resonates with me is I feel like, okay, you can start with just HubSpot and the capabilities you'll get out of the box there are great. But at the point in time that you grow and you decide you do want additional capabilities that aren't in HubSpot, because HubSpot is an open platform and has this ecosystem of hundreds of partners, you don't have to switch to some whole new foundational platform. You can now just sort of extend and add on. And so when you're making that early choice, I would look at that dimension of the product you're choosing just to make sure that, hey, listen, I want something simple and easy today, but I also kind of want to make sure that, I've got the room to grow in the future.
So, in the digital age, the fast eat the slow, right? Those organizations that can fulfill customers' expectations as easily as customers can place orders, right, on the front end, on the back end, are the ones that typically outperform. So that obviously means not just a front end stack, but a back end stack, ERP as well, enterprise resource planning applications, which are HR and financial planning and bill of materials, all the type of things that go into fulfilling customer demand. Talk to us a little bit about the difference between marketing software and ERP.
Yeah, well, the marketing software is definitely my area of expertise, but I think you framed it well that, kind of if you think of CRM as being like the heart of the front office, ERP is very often the heart of the back office. And for a long time, actually, those two systems weren't very well integrated. They were different buyers, they had different needs, they kind of lived in their own world. But as we become more and more pure digital businesses, or certainly digitally powered businesses, it's so incredibly important then to look at okay, how do I start to connect these two systems together? And so we're seeing a lot more integrations between front office and back office and HubSpot. And I expect that's going to be something that'll just be a standard requirement moving forward.
What are some of the ERP integrations that HubSpot has?
Let's see, there's integrations to NetSuite, there's integrations to Intuit, there's, we got a company that provides integrations to Sage. And there's actually starting to be some really interesting disruptive players in the ERP space that, a lot of the ERP companies out there are some of the large ones that have been around a long time. But sort of the same dynamic that you saw in MarTech, where, there was a whole wave of new startups and new innovators. You're starting to see more of those also in the back office world as well.
We're talking to Scott Brinker. He is the Vice President of Platform Ecosystem at HubSpot. Stay with us. People who are struggling to compete online come to me for help, and they're usually confused about why they can't generate new business online. Most of them have a website and are doing content marketing and social media, but it's not working. When they come to me, they think they need a better website or more followers. They mention companies like Shopify, Grubhub, and Peloton, who are killing it online, and they wonder what those guys do differently. If you want to know why some digital companies outperform, get my book, The Digital Pivot, and find out what it takes to build a modern revenue engine. You can listen to the first chapter for free at digitalpivotbook.com. The Digital Pivot explains how to stack business value with digital technology by focusing on fundamentals first. The book maps out a framework for competing online by taking a sequential approach to owned, shared, and earned media outreach. And it also unlocks positioning opportunities for PR and marketing professionals who want to help their clients win online. The Digital Pivot is available as a hardcover, ebook, and audiobook, and you can download the first chapter free at digitalpivotbook.com. We're back with Scott Brinker, the Vice President of Platform Ecosystem at HubSpot. Scott, let's talk a little bit about competing in a data-driven world for small business, because as Kai-Fu Lee artfully wrote in his book, what was his book's name again? AI Superpowers. There's no data like more data. So, I mean, if that's the case, how can small business ever compete with the likes of Amazon?
Well, I mean, again, I think relevant data is arguably even more valuable than just more data, and so I think the question becomes like, okay, for your customers and the engagements that you have with them, are you able to collect over time a set of data that really helps you serve them better than anyone else? I mean, again, it can be as simple as, like the restaurant down the street that, we like to go to, once they get to know me and they know my orders and they're able to just say, oh, okay, yep, you want the usual. Oh, yeah, that's great. That's wonderful. Oh, we know you like X, this week we've got this special for Y. Oh, that's perfect. That's awesome. I mean, it's really that same concept, just slightly larger scale. And so as long as you're finding the data that really helps you be relevant and useful to your customers, that's important. And also, I guess, I mean, it's just interesting to think about, there's a lot of data that's available on, like these companies that essentially specialize in things like, buyer intent, companies like Bombora or even like G2 or things like this, where, they're not looking to encroach on any like, privacy issues here, but like, hey, if I see someone from business X is doing like a comparison for software, on this site here, can I send a signal that's associated with that account so that those sorts of companies who are competing there in account-based marketing, can leverage that data to be able to, change, the cadence of who they're reaching out to. I mean, there's just a lot of cool things you can do today without being Amazon.
Meaning is at the intersection of data sets. So, it's important to have one dashboard where you can see what's going on, so you can compare this to that and pivot and find out, where the meaningful business insights are. If you were talking to someone who was on a best of breed stack and they're using GA4, Google Analytics 4, and they come to you and they say, you know what, Scott, my data it doesn't look right. I know I need to improve it. I need a marketing ops person who can get in there and figure out how to get my GA4 reporting correctly. How do I find someone? I can't afford someone full time. Where do I go?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a tremendous number of agencies and consultants that, specialize in these solutions. Like I know in the HubSpot universe, something like 40% of our customers, are working with one of our like solutions partners or agency partners, for this exact reason. It's because, the service providers who just do this day in and day out, and they get to do it across a whole range of clients, it's just incredibly efficient for them to be able to come in and say, okay, listen, we've seen this before. We can show you how to get the value out of it. A lot of these services can be very on-demand driven. Like, you might have an initial engagement with them and then, you can be fine on your own. And then if like a year from now, you have other questions, you want to bring them back in, you can do that. It's it is a very good model for companies that are going through this transformation. And just first of all, can't necessarily hire all these people on their own because they wouldn't really even be able to afford it. And then, frankly, they wouldn't even need it. They wouldn't need a full-time staff for that because once they get set up and running and they're operating in their cadence, their needs are considerably less.
As more and more companies look to align sales, marketing, and customer service into sort of a revenue operation, and we see these RevOps folks sort of take over for marketing ops and sales ops and whoever's supporting service. How do you think that will change marketing strategy?
Well, I think definitely connecting these elements of the customer experience is huge. And it's, when you think about it, it's been kind of strange, how long we allowed these things to kind of operate in their silos, and they would do their throw it over the wall, hand off, and I guess that was okay for a certain stage of, digital evolution. But at this point in time, I mean, for so many businesses, the experience people have on marketing touch points, the experience they have when they're talking to someone in sales, the experience they have when they are a customer and they need some sort of support or help. I mean, these things get so entwined that I think for a company that's embracing revenue operations and really looking to say, okay, how do we view this as a complete system, and not just a series of disconnected silos? I think it opens up a much broader thing of the lifetime value of customers and how you optimize the strategy for that.
Do you think? How do you think it will impact HubSpot? Do you think? Because does HubSpot have the trifecta? Are you guys sales?
We're loving this move. Yeah, so we have a marketing hub, sales hub, service hub, and actually we've been doing a lot of work with the RevOps community lately, just because that whole movement just feels like such a great opportunity for people to get more value out of these connected systems.
Does it eliminate the need for marketing ops?
It depends. There's a range of things that people do in marketing ops. I think certainly the data element of what's happening, from a revenue ops perspective, just makes a lot of sense to standardize across all of these different functions. Depending on the nature of the marketing ops role, there might be other activities that were a little bit more specialized, like, the actual building out, of certain experiences, certain, customer workflows, things like this that might have been very specific, to the way marketing operates, like the way it operates a webinar or the way, it's, executing a campaign at scale. That's just kind of different. Like there isn't an analogy to that necessarily in sales or customer success. But whether you still have someone in quote unquote marketing ops, or it's just one of the specializations of someone in the broader revenue ops, I think there's flexibility right now for like, which model works best for your business? What size are you at? Who are the actual people involved? For small businesses, it might be, half of one person's job doing all of this. So, hi, I'm the revenue ops department.
One of the things we hear a lot from people talking about artificial intelligence is, artificial intelligence will work best as a human-assisted technology, that it will not replace technology. And you've been at this long enough now to have looked at it from many different perspectives. So just sort of as a parting thought, when do you ignore the data and trust your gut?
Yeah, I don't know that it's so much ignoring the data, but it's seeking the context for the data. So I'll give you an example. So I actually, not 10 years or so ago, like my first business was very much around conversion optimization, in marketing. And conversion optimization, right, in the early days is like, okay, well, I'm going to have this special ad that I'm going to, have a keyword, put a special ad in Google for it. I'm then going to take it to a particular landing page with an offer, and I've got a conversion rate there, and I A/B test it, and one of the things that, I always felt very passionate about is you had to be careful of local optimization. And by that, I mean like, okay, listen, if I want to juice the conversion rate of a landing page, all I have to do is say like, hey, give us your name and number and we will solve all your problems. Sign up here. Awesome. Amazing. And of course people do it and you get the conversion rate and it's great, but then on the other side, you don't actually fulfill that, right? I mean, there's, no way you can, and so those people then they feel you cheated them, they're never going to become your customer. That actually the whole campaign was a negative impact, on your business. But up at the top of the funnel, man, the conversion rate looked like, oh my goodness, you guys are heroes, and to me, that's kind of a microscopic example of just the challenge we have, with AI and data is a lot of times it is a slice of what's happening. And it kind of requires that human judgment still to say like, okay, what's the bigger context in which that data, is coming to us?
Scott, when do you expect to bring back the conference, MarTech?
Well, we've been continuing to do it virtually. We just did a virtual one this week, actually. I don't know if we'll be back in person in the fall, but certainly hoping to be back in the spring of next year, if not.
How was the virtual one? Any lessons learned you can share?
My whole focus for my keynote was on AI and no code systems because the way you framed it of AI being an assist, I think is actually very much where we're at. And boy, it's actually really cool where we're at right now. Like some of these tools out here for a non-technical marketer, they just give you these superpowers, that are, it's a really sweet time. So my whole keynote was going through a whole bunch of examples of that.
In terms of the actual management of the conference, any lessons learned on sort of, virtualizing an event that had been a real world event, what worked, what didn't?
We did these, in addition to the sessions, we would then do these like Google Meet Hangouts, after the sessions for affinity groups. And that was good. I mean, I think that's one of the things we've all realized that, we miss, from real world events is the content. You can kind of get the content virtually and, it's almost the same thing, but it's that networking and serendipity, with peers and those conversations that just sort of happen, over a beer or, lunch, a box lunch at a table. I mean, this is kind of where the informal knowledge network like really, comes to life. And so it's very hard to recreate that, in the virtual environment today. But, I think the closer you can try and like get to that, the better.
Yeah, there's no periphery. I wonder if VR goes mainstream and we can be in a virtual environment, I wonder if that would introduce that serendipity to a virtual event.
Yeah, Ready Player One meets MarTech. I love it.
Scott Brinker, Vice President of Platform Ecosystem at HubSpot and editor at Chief MarTech. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Eric. Take care.
To master B2B lead generation, you can listen to the first chapter of my new book, The Digital Pivot, for free at digitalpivotbook.com.